Thank you so much for attending this information session. My name is Spencer, and I am the Director of Educational Innovation here at the Colorado Department of Higher Education. And here in my capacity at the department, I'm responsible for all things OER, and I have the absolute pleasure of working with an all-star group of colleagues from institutions throughout the state who together comprise the OER Council. This is a great, outstanding group of individuals, as I mentioned, and I've been working with them since last year on a number of these initiatives. And I just want to emphasize the point of their involvement and how important they've been throughout this process. So we will get into a little bit more about some background on the OER Council and the work we're doing in the state of Colorado, and also the information on your institutional representatives is posted on our website, and we have our website listed there. We are trying to pay as much attention as we can to our website to make it a useful, practical resource for folks in terms of using it as a one-stop shop for the grant program information and other types of OER resources. So stay tuned, as that website will continue to grow, and the plan for it is to be a very useful tool for you all. So as I mentioned, we'll jump in today with a little bit of an overview, and most of the stuff that we're going to cover, if not everything, is on our website as well. So again, I'll kind of lead you towards that website as a resource for you and for you to share with others on your campus. And if there's something missing, of course, I'm happy to set up a phone call or answer questions via email. And these information sessions, we may or may not have council members joining us. Let's see here. I do see maybe one or two that are able to join us today. So we'll have them chime in a little bit later on. But for the time being, I'm going to jump in and just give you all some background on the work of OER in the state of Colorado. So the work here started in the 2017 session here in the state government, and the Colorado legislature passed and Governor Hickenlooper signed Senate Bill 17-258. This created the OER, Open Educational Resources Council, and this is a statewide body that was charged to develop a plan for resources, open education resources, in order to benefit college and K-12 stakeholders and students and others throughout the state of Colorado. So the OER Council during 2017 assembled, and we met probably about half a dozen times throughout that year. And like I said, I like to sing the praises of the OER group because they really did contribute a lot of time and effort into creating this initial kind of foundation for OER work in Colorado, so that we could lead ourselves to where we are now with the grant program, which is what you all are interested in. And so really a lot of the work that they did in 2017 set the foundation for what's going on now and what will continue to happen for the next 3 years, which is super exciting. In 2017, the council came together, and there was a statewide survey that they developed along with the help of our research associate at Witchy, who was hired as a contractor to help flesh out the project. And the council's report, as well as the researcher's report, can be found on our website. You can see the snapshot of the cover there from our report last year. And in that report, there were some recommendations set forth by the council. Its inaugural council was made up of public institutions of higher education, faculty, staff, administrators, librarians, instructional designers, as well as 2 state government agency offices, which are the Colorado Department of Higher Education and the Colorado Department of Education, including the State Librarian's Office. And that council is also extended into this year and for another 3 years. So that's super exciting. The recommendations that came forth as a result of this council were a few. One, as you all know, was the grant program, which is very exciting. Then there were some other duties that kind of came as a recommendation. One of the recommendations was for the council to exist as an entity. So the legislator took that and said, great, put that in our next bill, which was House Bill 18-1331, which was signed in May of 2018, May of this year. And that gives us our charge as a group. And the state legislature, as well as the Joint Budget Committee, JBC, took the recommendations of the council very seriously, and also gave the council and the Colorado Department of Higher Education some additional duties as a result of this bill. So in this bill, you'll also find, thanks to the council, some other responsibilities for the council, which are the statewide grant program, policy and reporting, and advisement to the Colorado Commission on Higher Education, which is my governing board, the governing board here at the Colorado Department of Higher Education. There's also some information in the bill. If you would like to read the bill, happy to share that with you, but information around campus outreach. And one of the goals is to elevate OER in the state of Colorado. When we got the survey responses back as part of the report in 2017, we found that this was a time to strike while the iron's hot. There was lots of interest from students, faculty, staff, community members around OER, and the potential impact it could have on student finances and student learning. And so, excuse me, the council is to help to continue with that outreach and continue to elevate OER and familiarize campuses, students and staff and faculty with OER throughout the state. Pardon me. And one further duty is to communicate and curate information through the website is one primary way by which we are doing this. Another way is through the use of information sessions such as these that we are holding throughout the course of October and into probably into the rest of the year, maybe different to or more specific to other topics within OER. This is more specific to the grant. So that kind of sets the stage. A little bit more on the council. The council will hold appointments until fall of 2021. As I mentioned, this is a 3-year project, and this is meant to last the same amount of time as the funds that are supposed to be allocated for this project. And so we are here in year 1, and we are going to move forward until fall of 2021 with this council and with this work. So with regard to the grant, just wanted to mention the intent of the grant. And if you look at the RFP, and I'm sure that all of you have seen a copy of it by now. If not, it is posted on the website. We will be happy to share that information with you as well. It's available in PDF format, and I can get it to you in another format if necessary. But there is a section of the RFP listed as anticipated outcomes. And in that section, you'll see highlighted some of these outcomes that are now listed on the screen, which are addressing affordability in Colorado. We know that OER has the potential to impact students' personally and institutional finances, as it has in other states where scaled, shown and proven to have quite a large return on investment. And so that's kind of the idea here in Colorado. The state legislature said, we saw what has happened in the other states. We saw the information coming back from the survey here in Colorado. We've taken into consideration the recommendations of the council, and we think that this is worth investing some money. So let's develop this grant program. The council and the department will administer the grant program, and hopefully as we get creative faculty and staff on board to start utilizing these resources to help them with their innovative practices that they're no doubt employing already, we can see a bigger impact. So that's one thing. The other is elevating OER in Colorado. As I mentioned, a duty of the council and also a goal of this grant program. Obviously, we are in cycle 1 of this grant program. And so we want to elevate OER. We want to get out there and have people talking about open education in general and other open education practices and open educational resources specifically. Another is to encourage innovation. As I mentioned, there's a lot of amazing things going on that sometimes we at the department don't know about that are happening on your campuses. And so we see this group as a group that we can employ to help us stay plugged into some of those innovative things that are happening on campus. I know that the council itself is a very forward-thinking group, and so they have great connections and help us to kind of leverage those networks to see what else is happening out there on our campuses that we can either replicate or elevate and kind of admire and highlight as sort of best practices or things that we can do in the state. And that goes for open educational resources as well. And then finally, one other point of intent on this grant program, and then I'll get into more information on the grant specifically, is the alignment with the CDHE master plan. So for those of you who are not familiar with our master plan, it's called Colorado Rises, and we have a website which is kind of linked to the website for the OER Council, which I shared with you previously. But I just want to take a moment to say, share with you first here the strategic goals from the master plan. There's one overarching goal of 66% attainment by 2025 to help meet the job demand that will require such credentials in the future. And beneath that overarching goal, there are 4 more specific goals that I wanted to highlight, because some have argued, and I might be one of those individuals, to think that OER might have an impact at any one of these strategic goals. And those strategic goals are increased completion for college students or students aiming to get their credential, a meaningful credential. Goal number 2 is erase equity gaps, addressing the gaps in Colorado that we all know about and are familiar with. This has the potential to help with that as well. Improving student success. We've seen some data in some of the research to say that OER can have a positive impact on student success as well in the classroom. And strategic goal number 4, which is, I think, the most clear and pervasive, which is invest in affordability and innovation. So this is the department saying we are investing in that innovation and hoping to address affordability, as we know that is an issue in our state and nationally as well. So again, as I mentioned, we're kind of jumping into this national movement of OER, and that is really the intent of the program. But at the same time, it does address a lot of the things specific to Colorado that the department has worked with institutions to align and put into our strategic plan, and kind of the work that we do as a state and then work that you all do on campus. So we'll take time for questions near the end, as I mentioned again. So I wanted to highlight a bit more about the grant itself. So when you take a look at the RFP, you will notice that there are 2 types of grants for this grant cycle. So 2 types of proposals will be solicited for an initial round of funding. And in this initial round of funding, we have upwards of $500,000. And then that will kick up to $1 million in year 2 and year 3. So these figures may look somewhat different next year, but for this first iteration, this first grant cycle, these are the numbers that the council has landed on for the different types of grants. So the first grant, obviously, is the institutional level grants, and institutional grants are most likely to range from $10,000 to $99,999, just under $100,000. You love those rounded state numbers as much as I do, I know. And so don't pay too much attention to that $1 below 100,000. I think that obviously that is rounded for state purposes, kind of our internal processes, but there's not much other further intent behind that, just to say that this is the institutional level grant, the larger size grant for this grant cycle. And then the faculty and or staff, public institutions of higher education, those individuals or small groups that would like to apply for grants ranging from $250 to just under $5,000 threshold. And so these are the 2 levels of grants, and 2 other bullet points there on the right of your screen that I wanted to mention, that though not required, minimization of indirect costs is encouraged. We want to be as intentional as possible with these proposals and your budget proposals as well, and to make sure that these funds are going towards those innovative ideas and practices that I mentioned before. And so as I mentioned, this is highly encouraged by the council. And the other note I wanted to make is that partial funding and or revisions to scope of work or project modification is allowable as well. So that's just a fancy way of saying, if you come back and you say, hey, we wanted $1,000, and we said, well, could you do it twice if we gave you $2,000? Then you might turn around and say, yeah, I think we could. And likewise, on the other end of the spectrum, if you're asking for a larger amount of money and we say we will fund A and B, but we are not willing to fund C, that is when a revision to the scope of work would be made. So these are all part of the grant review process. And just a couple of notes that I wanted to point out as we talk about the different types of grants and the levels of awards that we are entering into for this first year. And as I mentioned, when the funds kick up to $1 million next year, these amounts may look a little bit different. There probably will be some lessons learned, but just for the purpose of this initial funding year, these are where we're at. A couple of notes on the RFP itself that I wanted to highlight some of the sections, and you will see, and please pay special attention to the difference in institutional level and individual level grants. The criteria do vary slightly. So we tried to make them parallel as much as possible, but there are some things that are just more specific to one than the other. So make sure if you're writing to the criteria of one of those, that you are writing to the correct criteria because they do vary slightly, as I mentioned. Eligibility for the grant program is spelled out as well, and that includes institutions of higher education, public institutions of higher education in the state of Colorado, or individuals or small groups at those public institutions. And that is, of course, with institutional and departmental support, which is part of the proposal process as well, something that will be asked for by the RFP. So if you're referring to the RFP, I think that if you look at the sections for the required sections for the proposal, that's the section that I'm talking about, in which is highlighted the requirements for institutional and individual level grants. There's also a section called selection criteria, which will kind of be overlaid over the top of these sections of the proposal. Confusing for you all maybe, but I think it makes more sense that as you move towards writing toward the required sections of the proposal, you just keep in mind these selection criteria. And I'll go ahead and mention those right now. And I'm just gonna read the statement here. The CCHE, which is again our governing board, shall take into account the following, which is the project affects courses with high student enrollment or high textbook material costs. So if you can demonstrate that, I think that's a good thing. Affects high impact courses such as core courses, guaranteed transfer, GT Pathways, Gen Ed courses, which is our GE core credits here in the state of Colorado, or courses that are part of concurrent enrollment. Let's see here. Supports adaptation and development of open educational resources by teams of faculty, librarians, and instructional designers within public institution of higher education or across multiple institutions. So there's an emphasis on collaboration. As I mentioned, this group, the OER Council, and the work that we've been doing is a very collaborative, very forward-thinking group, and the open education movement is kind of embraced in this grant proposal as well. So demonstrating that collaboration is something that might be important. Includes a demonstrated commitment and plan for accessibility. There's been a lot of emphasis on accessibility in this movement and the importance of remaining accessible, which we will talk about a little bit more later. And then aligns with departmental, institutional, and or state mission or goals or strategic initiatives. I mentioned those of the Colorado Department of Higher Education earlier, and you likely have some on your campus that may align with a number of our strategic initiatives or your department's initiatives. So those are the other selection criteria that we have laid out in the RFP. Just a note in the review process, which will be taking place after the closing of this RFP, which is Halloween, October 31st. We thought that would be an easy date for everyone to remember, is the closing date, and we'll get more into timeline a little bit later. But the rubric directly reflects the selection criteria and sections of the proposal. So just keep that in mind, and that is what the council will be using. There also is, and one thing I want to make clear, there is an exemption process in order to avoid conflicts of interest for OER Council members, in which they will recuse themselves from reviewing or recommending proposals which they have either written or supported or that are from their home institution. So take special note of that as well. And finally, if you see the final page of the RFP, there's a little bit more detail on the agreement, which details both points of emphasis that I mentioned, which are accessibility and this notion around Creative Commons licensing and being as open with the materials or the outputs from this project to make sure that they are shareable and they are accessible to those in the state of Colorado and beyond, of course. But we want to make sure that those resources that are being developed are easily shared throughout the state. And so there is an emphasis there on that point as well. So that, like I mentioned, again, on that final agreement page, item number 2 addresses that, and item number 5. Those are the 2 points of emphasis that I mentioned. So moving into timeline now, we're kind of getting towards the end of this presentation. As I mentioned, it's going to be real quick, and then we'll take your questions. And I have some FAQ that we've kind of been receiving that I can also highlight as well for you all. September 25th, we opened up the RFP, which was fantastic and super exciting. And through September and October, we have these ongoing informational sessions. We also have OER Council meetings, which occur the second Thursday of each month. So we do have monthly meetings. If you're interested in attending one, they are available via Zoom. They're open state agency level meetings. We also could have you meet up with your institutional representative or somebody who's in your area or vicinity. So we can connect you with one of the council members if you'd like to speak to somebody one-on-one. I am also making myself accessible as possible, so happy to entertain a phone call if folks have questions or can't attend a meeting but just want to hear about kind of more what's going on with the council. Let's see here. And yes, Dan, I can email you the FAQ, no worries. Just got a little chat there, pardon me. So I'll keep running through this timeline here and then we'll get to more questions. And again, as I mentioned, October 31st is the closing date for the RFP. So please be aware of that timeline as well. Pardon me. November 29th will be the end of the review period for the council, at which point the council will make recommendations to take to the commission, the Colorado Commission on Higher Education, which again is the governing board here, will give their final consent on the recommendations for grant recipients. And so the council will be reviewing with closer scrutiny and then making that recommendation to the commission. And that will happen at the commission's meeting in February, which is the first week of February. Just the way the timings worked out this year, we will not be, obviously we cannot take this to the council, to the commission in December because we will need to take it as a discussion item one meeting before. And so that will be in December that we're taking it to the commission. And then following up with them at their next meeting. They do not have a January meeting due to kind of just historical way that they've conducted. And they usually probably have about 8 or 9 meetings a year. And January happens to be one of those months in which they do not have a regular business meeting. So we'll be getting on the agenda for the soonest meeting afterwards, which is February of 2019 for that consented item. And that means that February and March is when the funds will be dispersed to campuses, distributed to campuses, which is actually a pretty smooth process on our end once everything else is done and all of our agreements are put together. And then in July of 2019, we'll be asking for a progress report. We understand the longitudinal nature of some of these projects. And so we do want to just have somewhat of a progress report by the summer because we will be reporting back to the Colorado State Legislature in October, issuing our first year's report. And so we'd like to have, some projections and obviously information on who the grant recipients are. So some of this stuff that's reported back in that July 2019 progress report will help us to inform our report for October 2019. And we know that more meaningful data may come later on as we start to see the impact of some of these projects and utilization of some of these resources. And so we will be reporting back in October of every year starting next year. So that goes through the next 3 years, of course, as well. And then in May of 2020, the final report for this round of grant cycle funding will be used. And one other note is unused funds must be returned in May of 2020. So I would have it on my radar to have those funds spent, or intended to be spent or accounted for by May of 2020 at the latest, so that you don't have to return any of those funds. And those funds will be returned to the state general budget, not to the department for the use of the department's at the discretion of the department. Rather, they're going back to the state. So we'd really like to see those funds utilized for the purpose that we are setting out, which is this Open Education Resources Initiative. And again, this is the timeline for the first grant cycle. And I just wanted to make sure to highlight that for folks, because this is what we're sticking to for the first year. I anticipate that in grant year cycle 2 and 3, the timeline will be somewhat similar, but some of these dates may adjust. And I would say that this is the latest timeline that we would probably anticipate. We do need to discuss this in the council and kind of talk about next steps in terms of our further grant funding cycles. But this is what we're set on for this year. And that kind of reminds me of one particular FAQ question that we had, and that was one question around those who may be proposing or submitting a proposal that is indeed a 2-3 year project, and you're looking to get 2 or 3 years of funding. In conversation with our chair and vice chair of the OER Council, and I think the council would agree as well, that these should be treated as independent proposals, although you could allude in your application, you could allude to phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3 if you're intending to plan to apply in future years. So that is one thing that's come up, and there will be available funding obviously in the future. That is the plan. But for this first year, you should be putting together a comprehensive plan that matches up with that timeline of completing the project by May of 2020. So that said, I think we do have a couple of members of our council on the call, Jonathan and Brittany and others who might be out there. If there's anything else you wanted to detail or kind of share with folks, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, I think we'll open it up for questions from the general attendees. And you can put those through at the chat. If not through the chat, feel free to video chat as well. I'll be here to answer any questions. We just had one question about sharing the FAQ. The intent is to put the frequently asked questions, or FAQ, on our website. So if there is more information that's out there, that's kind of some questions that have been coming from some of the other information sessions, we'll be happily sharing those on our website probably in the next week or so. Like I said, we see our website as an ongoing project and resource. We're trying to make it as resource rich as possible for folks. So if you need more information on any specific item, you can reach out to me or a member of the OER Council if you are familiar with them, or I can get you connected with somebody who's either representing you or in your regional area, and maybe you can sit down with them or have a phone call with them. But we have many perspectives on the council. We have staff level, instructional design, librarians, faculty members, several faculty members, researchers. We've got Department of Education members as well. And so a couple of administrators, technology experts. So whoever you need to talk to, we've got a good little group, and we can also offer up those human resources, so to speak. I'm not seeing any more chats come through. So it sounds like we kind of gave you the 30,000-foot view of everything that's going on. Again, I encourage you to check out our website, and if you get the chance to do so, I'll show that here. This is our website. If you get the chance to do so, there's more information on the grant program. There's a little bit, obviously you all were able to find the link to the OER events in the future, maybe having a bit more diversity with regard to those events. We're just kind of kicking things off with these informational sessions, and resources as well. So if you're looking at resources, there's a great resource page that our group has been putting together. It's got everything from accessibility tips to licensing information, how-tos, and all those different types of things that you might be thinking through as you're considering a project on your campus. So again, I encourage you to page through here and kind of just take a look and join us for an OER Council meeting if you get the opportunity. If not, my door is always open and I'm happy to meet with you. So thank you all very much for taking time today, and we will talk to you soon.